On a rainy evening in Atlanta, Georgia, on Friday, November 4, 2022, the rain-slicked streets reflected the restless glow of traffic lights, each blink marking time that could never be rewound. Sirens wailed somewhere in the distance, swallowed by the hum of a city easing into Friday night. Behind the glass of Jewels, a warm light still flickered, a beacon for customers who would never come. Inside, velvet boxes sat untouched, guarding treasures that would never be claimed. Her name was Emilia Roberts, 25 years old. A smile that lit up a room. Dreams sharper than diamonds. She thought she'd found love, someone who saw her heart. But he was staring at something else entirely. What he took from her could never be replaced. They called it love. They called it fate. But fate, sometimes, wears a mask. The first cracks were small, almost invisible. She didn't see them. She couldn't. And by the time she did, Emilia was already standing on the edge of a betrayal so deep, it would consume everything she'd built, and destroy the person she believed herself to be. If the person you trusted most was quietly tearing your world apart, would you see it coming? Before this night was over, Atlanta would lose one of its brightest lights. But to understand how, and why, we have to start at the beginning. Before we continue, this is the Crime Catalog. Stay tuned, and let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so you never miss any of our upcoming stories. Before the headlines, before the horror, Emilia Roberts was simply a young woman who believed the world still held more good than harm. Born on a humid May morning in 1997 in Macon, Georgia, she entered life as the only child of a quiet, hard-working father and a mother with an entrepreneurial spirit. Her childhood was filled with the kind of modest happiness that doesn't make the news: neighborhood bike rides, the smell of freshly pressed hair in her mother's salon, and evenings spent at the kitchen table doing homework while her parents spoke softly in the background. That small, safe world cracked when Emilia was just 14. Her father, her anchor, was taken suddenly by heart complications. His death left a silence in their home that never truly lifted. From that day forward, her mother carried both the weight of grief and the burden of providing for them. The family salon became not only their main source of income, but also a school of life for Emilia. After school, she swept floors, greeted customers, and learned, without realizing it, the rhythms of business and the value of earning trust one honest interaction at a time. By her late teens, Emilia had grown into a young woman who didn't just survive loss, she transformed it into motivation. She began selling handmade trinkets and budget jewelry at local flea markets, setting up a folding table and a dream. Customers returned not just for the items, but for her warmth. She remembered names, remembered stories. She made people feel seen. And slowly, what started as a table in a crowded market grew into Jewels, a small but elegant downtown Atlanta boutique that reflected her taste for simple beauty and her tireless work ethic. Outside of business, Emilia poured herself into community service. On weekends, she volunteered at shelters and community kitchens, the kind of work that rarely brings glory but builds quiet respect. Friends described her as trusting but not naive, a woman who could listen without judgment, yet wouldn't be easily fooled. Still, those closest to her noticed something deeper. Emilia valued love and loyalty above all else, sometimes more than her own protection. By 2022, she shared a modest Decatur apartment with her close friend Susan Miller, a tech consultant who often teased Emilia about how she still made handwritten to-do lists in an age of smartphones. The two women balanced each other. Susan was pragmatic and cautious, while Emilia still believed in silver linings. Her life was far from perfect, but it was hers, steady, self-made, and built on the belief that trust could still be a safe investment. Yet, there's a quiet danger in building your life on trust. It can be the very thing that makes you magnetic, and the very thing that makes you a target. So, let me ask you, and be honest with yourself, do you think being kind-hearted makes you more vulnerable to being taken advantage of? On July 3, 2022, the day was already ordinary enough, sunlight spilling across the quiet streets of Atlanta, the hum of distant traffic, but inside Emilia's modest apartment, her phone chimed with the sound of a Facebook notification. The profile name read, Jack Anderson. His display photo was the kind you might find on a charity website. Sun-dappled outdoors, a man in his late 30s smiling faintly as if the camera had caught him mid-thought. His bio was short and neat. Real estate investor. Austin, Texas. Hearts of Tomorrow advocate. At first glance, it all looked harmless. Maybe even admirable. His page was sprinkled with charity posts, pictures of children in brightly colored clothes, captions about building homes, calls for kindness. There were even old photos of him volunteering, always smiling, always surrounded by people. The kind of profile designed to put walls down, not raise them. But Emilia had been online long enough to know that pictures could be masks. And yet, she paused. Something about the way he had worded his first message to her. Your work with Jewels is beautiful. I admire people who build something from nothing. Felt personal, specific. Not the usual copy and paste compliment. She clicked into his profile again, reading his About section more carefully. Jack claimed he had grown up in a string of foster homes across Texas. Parents gone before he could remember. Saved, he said, by a small non-profit called Hearts of Tomorrow, which had given him stability, mentors, and, eventually, the chance to start over. He said it was why he gave back now. Why he cared about helping others find their feet. It was a life story built like an emotional trap, gentle, inspiring, but lined with just enough tragedy to pull at her heart. She typed back a cautious reply. Thank you, Jack. That's kind of you to say. Over the next week, the messages grew longer. What began as polite exchanges on her public posts slid into the private space of Messenger. There, Jack's words shifted, still warm, but now threaded with vulnerability. He told her about sleepless nights, the fear of losing everything, the loneliness that came even with success. It was disarming. By the second week, they were talking almost every night. What started as a few curious replies became late-night calls that stretched until dawn, their voices dipping into the kind of personal territory usually reserved for people you've known for years. But in those moments, her phone warm against her ear, the street outside silent, Emilia began noticing something. Jack never quite answered certain questions directly. His timeline sometimes wavered, little details shifting ever so slightly, like furniture moved half an inch in a room. Not enough to seem wrong, but just enough to make you stop and think. Still, the pull was there. Jack had the rare ability to make her feel seen, understood in a way that both comforted and unsettled her. And here's where the danger begins. If you met someone online whose story felt inspiring, but also just a little too perfect, would you keep talking to them? Or would you walk away before the cracks start to show? For 3 months, Emilia's phone was a lifeline, not just a device, but a portal to a man who seemed to see into her soul. Every morning began with a notification from Jack. Every night ended with his voice in her ear. They built a rhythm, almost like a shared heartbeat. Video calls over breakfast, laughter spilling across time zones. Playlists carefully curated, hers full of soft R&B and Nigerian love ballads, his with a surprising mix of indie folk and old-school soul. Voice notes whispered just before sleep, the words lingering in the dark long after the sound faded. Jack had a way of asking questions no one else ever had. Not the shallow small talk she was used to, but deep, intentional ones. What was your happiest memory as a kid? What's the one dream you've never told anyone? What's your biggest fear? The one you'd never say out loud? And somehow, she answered them all. For Emilia, it was intoxicating. She found herself telling him about the early struggles of running her jewelry store, the days she doubted herself, the nights she stayed up redesigning her business logo because it just didn't feel right. Jack listened as if every detail mattered. When she mentioned a small sales win, his excitement was unrestrained, like a partner who'd been there through it all. Babe, that's huge. You're killing it. I can't wait to see where you take this. His praise wrapped around her like a blanket on a cold night. By October 2022, they made it official. Not just flirtations and late-night calls, but a relationship. Digital, yes, but to Emilia, no less real. There was only one thing. Jack rarely talked about himself. When Emilia asked about his family, his answers were vague. A mother he barely spoke to. A father, not in the picture. Siblings? It's complicated. And every time she tried to push, his tone would close off, just slightly, like a door being pulled almost, but not entirely, shut. It wasn't enough to make her suspicious. Yet. Then, one evening in late October, after an hour-long call full of laughter and plans, Jack's voice shifted, deeper, more deliberate. "I've been thinking," he said. "I want to meet you in person soon. And I have an idea for your store that'll change everything." The words hung there, heavy with promise. Emilia didn't know it yet, but that single sentence would mark the beginning of a path she could never turn back from. Jack stepped off the bus in Atlanta with that signature, easy smile Emilia had grown to adore. It was his birthday week, and in keeping with his annual tradition, he claimed the entire visit was about giving back to others. 4 days, they moved through the city together in a series of almost picture-perfect moments. Hospital corridors where Jack posed with children in wheelchairs, handing out toys Emilia had bought. Women's shelters where he charmed volunteers, delivering food baskets Emilia had paid for. Street corners where he shook hands with the homeless, his voice warm, his eyes shining. To anyone watching, Jack was the very image of selflessness. But Susan, Emilia's best friend, noticed something Emilia didn't. She saw how Jack's generosity never seemed to cost him a cent. Every bag of groceries, every package of toiletries, every toy. Emilia swiped her own card. And Jack always had the same line ready, sliding it in like a practiced excuse. "Don't worry, babe. I'll make it up in business next month. Trust me." Emilia trusted. Or maybe she wanted to. One chilly evening, after a day of charity runs, they stopped at a cafe. Jack sat across from Emilia, his hands wrapped around a mug of hot chocolate. He leaned forward, his voice low, almost confessional. "Hey, just so you know, my apartment's under renovation right now. New floors, painting, big mess. So I'm crashing with my cousin. No point in you visiting there. I'll come to you." It was casual, almost too casual, like a man dropping a small stone into a deep well, hoping you wouldn't hear the echo. Emilia smiled and nodded. Susan didn't. She'd heard too many variations of that excuse from too many men. She kept quiet, but in her gut, a knot was forming. The visit ended in early December. Jack hugged Emilia tight at the bus station, promising that the next time he came, things would be different. Emilia drove home with her heart full. Susan, riding silently beside her, stared out the window, wondering whether that different Jack promised was the kind of change you looked forward to, or the kind that left you broken. If a partner avoids you visiting their home, do you assume they're hiding something, or do you give them the benefit of the doubt? January 20th, 2023. The call came just after 11:30 p.m. Emilia was winding down for the night, curled under her blanket, when Jack's name lit up her phone. His voice was brisk, almost trembling with excitement. "Babe, this is it. This is the moment we've been waiting for." He spoke about a prime retail location in Texas, a high-traffic shopping strip, brand new construction, perfect footfall for jewelry sales. He painted pictures so vivid, Emilia could almost see them, the shimmering glass storefront with ER jewels, glistening in gold letters, velvet-lined displays catching the light, customers flooding in on opening day. It wasn't just a pitch. It was a vision. Their vision. Jack claimed the space wouldn't stay on the market for long. "I've already talked to the property manager. We need a deposit within 48 hours, or it's gone." Emilia hesitated, not because she didn't believe him, but because $15,000 was a lot to move in such a short time. Jack soothed her doubts with the same practiced charm he'd used since the beginning. "This is our future, baby. I'm thinking long-term, for us." Within 2 days, Emilia wired the money. But the dream didn't stop there. By February and March, Jack was back with urgent requests. Business licenses, signage permits, special clearances, each expense sounding just legitimate enough to pass without too many questions. By the time she added it all up, she'd sent $42,000. When Emilia's tone began to shift, cautious, questioning, Jack countered with documents. Receipts, stamped permits, legal-looking contracts. To anyone else, they might have been glaringly fake, but to Emilia, they were proof. Proof that her partner was working tirelessly to build their shared dream. Romance scams don't always start with flowers and end with lies. Sometimes, they start with promises of forever and end with requests for just one more transfer. Different questions might be hanging on the thought of victims, but, if it were you, at what point would you start doubting someone you love? The first warning signs didn't come like thunder. They came like the slow dimming of a light. For 3 days, Emilia's phone lay silent. No good morning texts. No affectionate voice notes. No, "I miss you, beautiful." At first, she told herself he was busy, maybe tied up with meetings or finalizing the Texas deal. But each hour of silence seemed to press harder against her chest. She would refresh her messages again and again, staring at that empty thread, willing his name to appear. On the 4th day, Jack finally resurfaced. His excuse was vague and heavy, something about a family drama he didn't want to get into. His voice over the phone carried a distant weight, as if she was now speaking to a man behind a locked door. Emilia, relieved just to hear from him, didn't push. But inside her, a small, uneasy whisper began to speak. That whisper grew louder when Susan called. Her friend's voice was firm, cutting through Emilia's defenses. "Emilia, you've never even been to Texas. You've never seen the store. Just go. Show up. Surprise him." Emilia, for a moment, imagined it, walking into the gleaming store, the smell of fresh paint, Jack's astonished smile. Maybe it would reignite the spark that seemed to be dimming. She floated the idea to him that night. Jack's reaction was instant and sharp. His voice, usually warm, now cracked like glass. "No, no, no, you can't. That'll mess up the paperwork. You showing up unannounced could ruin everything I've worked for. Do you understand?" The sudden spike of anger stunned her. She'd never heard him speak like that. It wasn't just what he said. It was the heat behind it, the urgency to keep her away. After the call, Emilia sat alone in her dimly lit living room, the TV flickering in the background but her mind far away. She replayed the conversation, her hand absently tracing the edge of her coffee cup. Why was a visit such a problem? What kind of paperwork would collapse just because she showed up? The days that followed were a strange blur. Jack's calls became shorter, more businesslike. He avoided personal topics, sticking to vague reassurances about the big break coming soon. Emilia found herself scrolling through their old messages, the early days, the hours-long calls, the midnight laughter, wondering when exactly the color had started draining out of this picture. The romance scam was tightening its grip, but it didn't happen with a violent pull. It was the slow, deliberate untying of knots, until the rope that once held her steady began to slip through her fingers. In romance scams, the silence isn't an accident. It's a tactic, the calculated withdrawal designed to create unease, to pull the victim forward in desperation. It's the psychological equivalent of stepping back to make someone chase you. If the person you loved suddenly reacted with anger to the idea of seeing them, would you see it as a red flag, or would you convince yourself they had a good reason? Emilia's fingers hover above her laptop keyboard, her stomach knotted with a cocktail of fear and suspicion. The apartment feels smaller tonight, like the walls themselves are leaning in, pressing on her chest. The blue light from her screen paints her face in cold tones as she types his full name into the search bar, the real name she pieced together from scraps. A misaddressed package, a glimpse of an ID in his wallet, and the way he once accidentally signed his name on a receipt. The search results load. Her breath catches. There it is, his smiling face, but not the version she knows. In the photo, he's wearing a tailored navy blue suit, looking proud and almost regal. Beside him, a woman in a flowing white gown grips his hand like she's holding on to a dream. The caption reads, April 29, 2023. Forever starts here. Her eyes dart to the location tag. Savannah, Georgia. Just 9 days ago. Emilia's vision blurs. For a moment, she thinks it's just rage, but then she realizes she's crying. Hot tears streaking down her cheeks, dripping onto the keyboard. Her body feels like it's been slammed into by a moving car, the air knocked clean out of her lungs. The man she thought was hers was never hers at all. She clicks through the album with trembling fingers. The happy couple cutting a cake, kissing under a cascade of rose petals, holding hands on a pier as the sun sets, like a postcard from a life she was never invited to. Her phone is already in her hand before she's fully conscious of what she's doing. She presses his contact and waits. 1 ring. 2. Then his voice. Deep, smooth, familiar. But suddenly it feels like a stranger's. Jack said, "Hey." Emilia responded, "Who is she?" Her voice is low, shaking, but deadly certain. There's a pause, followed by the faint sound of him exhaling. Jack answered, "You shouldn't be snooping around in things that don't concern you." Emilia said to him, "Don't concern me? I've given you thousands of dollars. He cuts her off, his tone shifting from icy calm to a serrated edge. Jack then added, "You gave me the money willingly. And here's a bit of advice. Push me, and you'll regret it." The words hang in the air like a threat soaked in venom. The line goes dead before she can respond. Her hand trembles so badly she nearly drops the phone. She's no longer just heartbroken, she's afraid. Within minutes, she's at Susan's door. Susan opens it to find Emilia pale, wide-eyed, her voice flat but urgent. "I'm going to the police," Emilia said. The look they exchange is heavy, charged with the understanding that this is no longer just about love, betrayal, or even money. This has crossed into dangerous territory. Outside, somewhere in the shadows, a black sedan idles with its headlights off. On May 17, 2023. It was an unusually warm Wednesday in Atlanta. Emilia had spent most of the day in her apartment, blinds half closed, the golden afternoon light cutting into her living room in thin, angled beams. She hadn't heard from Jack in days, not since the wedding revelation and their tense phone call, but she had been getting an uneasy feeling, a feeling like someone was always watching. Just after 6 p.m., the knock came. 3 short raps. Firm. Familiar. When she peered through the peephole, her stomach dropped. Jack. No warning. No text. No call. Just there. Standing in the hallway with that same easy smile she had once trusted, but now looked different, tighter, forced, and somehow colder. For a moment, she considered not opening the door. But then her mind flashed to the times they'd shared, the laughter, the warmth she once thought was real. Maybe he was here to apologize. Maybe, just maybe, he'd admit everything and return what he had taken. Against her better judgment, she unlatched the door. A neighbor across the hall, Mrs. Porter, 62, who always noticed everything, later told police she saw Emilia step back and let Jack in. She looked nervous, like she didn't really want him there, Mrs. Porter recalled. But the door shut, and whatever happened next stayed between those 4 walls. Over the next 2 hours, faint sounds drifted through the building. A muffled voice here, a thud there. Nothing loud enough to raise an alarm, but enough that, later, residents would remember wishing they had knocked to check. By 9 p.m., the building's quiet was shattered when another neighbor, returning from work, noticed Emilia's front door slightly ajar. He called her name. No response. Inside, the air felt heavy. Too still. Too quiet. Police would later determine the cause of death. Her phone and laptop were gone, the very devices containing months of messages, payment records, and the evidence she planned to take to the police. They weren't stolen at random. They were silenced along with her. This was no accident. This was deliberate. And the man who had once charmed her had just crossed the final line, from scammer to killer. 2 days had passed since Susan last heard from Emilia. At first, she told herself not to overthink it. Maybe Emilia was busy, maybe she needed space. But as the hours turned into days, the silence began to claw at her nerves. On a warm Thursday afternoon, Susan pulled up to Emilia's apartment complex, her hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly her knuckles were pale. She walked across the sun-baked pavement, her heart thudding in her ears. The hallway leading to Emilia's door was unusually quiet. No distant hum of a TV, no muffled music, no scent of fresh coffee drifting from her apartment like it usually did. Susan knocked. Once, twice, 3 times. "Emilia, it's me." Her voice echoed off the walls, met only by silence. She tried the handle. Locked. Susan's chest tightened. She pressed her forehead against the cool metal of the door, trying to will some sign of life from the other side. Something felt wrong. Horribly wrong. By the time police arrived, the sun was beginning to set, casting long shadows down the corridor. An officer peered through a small gap in the blinds of a living room window. Inside, the apartment looked bare. Too bare. When they forced the door open, the air was stale, almost lifeless. The living room felt stripped of personality. The television was gone, the laptop missing from its usual place on the coffee table. Even the small Bluetooth speaker that Emilia loved to use while working was nowhere to be seen. It was as if someone had scooped the life out of her home. Detectives began piecing together the puzzle. One of them, Detective Rains, leaned over a desk cluttered with case files and clicked open a security feed. The grainy footage showed a figure, head down, baseball cap pulled low, exiting the apartment complex late at night. Even in poor quality, there was no mistaking the walk, that stiff, hurried gait. It was Jack. Hours later, a financial report came in. Detective Rains scanned the columns, his eyes narrowing. In the days immediately after Emilia's death, Jack's bank account showed a flurry of withdrawals. $200 here, $500 there. Rapid, almost frantic. It painted a picture of someone running, and funding that run. Susan sat across from the detectives, her hands shaking as she clutched a paper cup of coffee she wasn't drinking. "Tell me you're going to get him," she said, her voice breaking. "Tell me you're not going to let him disappear." Rains glanced at her, his face unreadable. "We'll find him. But it's going to take time." 2 days of silence had turned into the beginning of a nightmare. What began as a friend's worry had now become an active homicide investigation. Jack was gone. Emilia's life was gone. And the clock was ticking. If this was your best friend, how far would you go to get justice? One morning in June 2023, the morning heat in Austin already shimmered off the hotel's glass facade when the black SUV rolled to a slow, deliberate stop outside. 2 plainclothes detectives stepped out, their eyes locked on the revolving doors. Inside, Jack Thornton, unshaven, wearing a wrinkled button-down, slung his duffel over one shoulder and pushed through the lobby, his phone still in hand. He never saw them coming. A firm hand clamped on his wrist, twisting it behind his back. "Jack Thornton," Detective Harris's voice was low but razor-sharp. "You're under arrest for the murder of Emilia Roberts." Hotel guests froze mid-check-in. A woman gasped audibly. Jack's eyes flicked between the badge and the cuffs, confusion giving way to something else, a faint, almost mocking smirk. "You've made a mistake," he said calmly, as if swatting away an inconvenience. The interrogation room smelled faintly of stale coffee and fear. Jack sat with his legs crossed, his cuffed hands resting loosely in his lap. Detective Harris leaned forward, voice clipped. "When was the last time you saw Emilia Roberts alive?" Jack's gaze drifted to the corner camera. "Alive and well," he replied, savoring the words. 2 days before she disappeared. She was fine when I left." Detective Harris slid a tablet across the table. On the screen, a time-stamped image of Jack entering Emilia's building the night she died, 10:42 p.m. Another shot, him leaving at 1:13 a.m. Harris didn't blink. "Funny, Jack. Because your phone's GPS, her neighbor's testimony, and the security footage all say otherwise." Jack chuckled softly. "You've built a nice little puzzle. Too bad you're missing a few pieces." The door swung open, and in walked Graham Coyle, a defense attorney with an immaculate suit and a predator's smile. He placed a hand on Jack's shoulder and turned to the detectives. "My client has nothing further to say without counsel present." As they gathered Jack's belongings, Coyle leaned just enough for his voice to carry across the table. "You have no murder weapon, no eyewitness to the act itself. And let's not pretend that what passed between my client and Ms. Roberts wasn't entirely consensual, including the money transactions." Detective Harris's jaw tightened. "You think this is over?" Coyle smiled thinly. "It hasn't even started." As Jack was escorted out, he caught Detective Harris's eye and mouthed something only the detective could read. "You can't prove it." On stiffened face was a storm of determination and doubt, knowing the arrest was just the opening move in a war that would play out in court. The trial began on a rainy Monday morning in September 2023, the kind of day where the sky seemed to carry the weight of grief itself. Inside the packed courtroom, every seat was filled. Reporters clutched their notepads. Strangers sat shoulder to shoulder, drawn by the darkness of the case. And in the front row, Susan sat rigid, her hands clenched so tightly her knuckles were white. Beside her, Emilia's mother stared straight ahead, her face a mask of controlled agony. The prosecution wasted no time painting the portrait of Jack not as a grieving acquaintance, but as a calculated predator. They unraveled the web of fraud and betrayal, how he charmed Emilia, drained her trust, and then, when confronted, chose violence over accountability. Screens lit up with bank records showing rapid withdrawals, travel logs aligning with Emilia's last moments, and security footage capturing his shadow slipping out of the apartment complex. Then came the experts. A forensic analyst explained the significance of partial fingerprints found on the inside of Emilia's apartment door, faint but consistent with Jack's. A digital crime specialist walked the jury through the trail of deleted files and attempted data wipes on Emilia's missing laptop, which had been recovered in a pawn shop 2 states away. And a behavioral profiler compared Jack's actions to patterns seen in romance scams turned lethal. But it was the emotional testimony that broke the room. Susan's voice trembled as she described their final phone call, Emilia's laughter just hours before she died. She told the jury about the fear her friend had begun to feel, the late-night text saying, "I don't know who I can trust anymore." When Emilia's mother took the stand, her words were fewer, but heavier. She simply said, "She was my only child, and I have to wake up every day knowing she died believing in someone who never truly existed." The defense tried to cast doubt. They suggested consensual money exchanges, insisted there was no direct physical evidence of the killing. But the mountain of circumstantial proof, the timeline, the financial motive, the lies, stood too tall. After 2 days of deliberation, the jury returned. The foreman's voice was steady. Guilty of first-degree murder. Guilty of financial fraud. Jack didn't flinch as the judge spoke, but Susan noticed the way his jaw tightened. Life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. The gavel came down, and the sound echoed like a final heartbeat. In that moment, justice was served. But for those who loved Emilia, justice did not bring her back. The courtroom emptied slowly, each step out into the cold afternoon feeling heavier than the last. And so, the story of Emilia Roberts ends in a courtroom, not with the future she imagined, but with a warning about the predators who walk among us, hiding behind charm, trust, and love. Betrayal is never loud at first. It creeps in quietly, wearing the mask of kindness, speaking the language of love. And before you know it, it has taken everything. Emilia believed in second chances. She believed in the goodness of people. But belief alone couldn't save her from the darkness that walked into her life with a smile. In the end, it wasn't just her life that was stolen. It was the dreams she had yet to chase, the mornings she would never wake up to, the family moments that will forever remain empty chairs at the table. For those who knew her, the pain never truly ends. For those who hear her story, it stands as a warning. Trust is precious, and once given to the wrong hands, it can cost more than you ever imagined. To anyone listening right now, remember this. Love can be beautiful, but love can also be the weapon someone uses to destroy you. If your heart says yes, but your instincts whisper no, Which voice will you obey? Her story is over. But maybe telling it will save someone else's life. What would you have done if this was your best friend? Tell us in the comments. And if you believe Emilia's story deserves to be heard, share this video. Somewhere out there, someone needs this warning before it's too late.